Well, it was a delight. I won't even say it was a moving tribute to you. I would at this time like to invite you both forward, Bob and Georgia, please. And as they're making their way here, let me just say a few words. Since 1810, Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary has been training men for ministry. It's an amazing thing to think of, 2 centuries and a decade plus. And since 2007, RPTS has annually awarded what we call our Faithful Servant Award to someone that we believe is a deserving recipient of that award. We want to see someone that has graduated from RPTS and has really demonstrated over a lifetime proven service to the Lord. And in my short tenure as president, this has quickly become one of my favorite times of the year, is to honor men that go out and serve God well. So I'm delighted that Pastor Robert Bob McFarland is our 2021 recipient. He's a man who graduated from RPTS 63 years ago, and he has exemplified the type of men that we want to train up at RPTS and, so to speak, send out our doors into pastoral ministry. Bob served God well in 3 different pastorates in Rose Point, Pennsylvania, Quinter, Kansas, and of course here in his beloved Topeka congregation. The denomination saw in Bob these marks of faithfulness and gave him greater responsibilities on occasion. They called him to be the Director of Education Services and Youth Ministry for the RPCNA for 5 years. The Midwest Presbytery here utilized Bob as a regional home missionary for 13 years. One of the things that I love about Bob's track record is that he delighted in bringing other men, younger men under him in his pastorate and doing internships with him and training them that way. And 2 men immediately that spring to my mind are Bruce Parnell, my good friend that I went to school with and who served faithfully, as you know, in this presbytery for many years as well. And then my lifelong mentor, Dave Long, spent some time with this guy also, and I heard stories about those times together in Quinter. Bob put into practice that principle in 2 Timothy 2:2, the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And so that there are others that have followed in Bob's footsteps as a testimony to his faithfulness. He still remains active. He continues to pray for workers, encouragement out in the field. A little known fact is Bob and I are kind of pen pals. He writes me often letters of encouragement telling me that he and Georgia are praying for me in the seminary, giving me insights into the history of the church, and so I always appreciate that as well. And we can't give this award without acknowledging that behind every faithful man, no, not behind, beside every faithful man is a faithful woman. We all know all that Georgia has done to keep this guy going and to keep him in line, and all those things that she's done over all these years as well. And so this honor is going as much to her as it is to Bob. But it is my great privilege on behalf of Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary to give to you, Bob, this Faithful Servant Award. And again, we are very thankful and privileged to hand it over to you.
Thank you.
And it's okay, I know we're Presbyterian. Just one other thing I'll say, and then I'll let Bob respond. But we've been collecting and are still collecting tributes from across the country, and we're assembling those in a book that we'll be giving to you as well. So
thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good evening and welcome to this part of the honor occasion. It's a special blessing to be in this presentation in this congregation. For it was 76 years ago that a very young teenager stood before the elders of this Topeka congregation to witness and to say, yes, I believe Jesus Christ is my Savior. I believe in the profession of faith, and I believe in the testimony of the Reformed Presbyterian Church. And to us, that meant the same as our wedding vow, until death do we part. We will be there with you. At the time of the 200th anniversary, I was honored to write one chapter in the celebration book. My chapter was entitled The Turtle on the Fence Post. And you must admit one thing, without me telling you a thing, if you see turtle on the fence post, what do you already know about it? That he couldn't possibly have gotten there unless somebody put him there. And I'm not here tonight because a lot of you helped put me there. I remember the plan here was originally this is to be held in Pittsburgh in a large hotel, and the storms and the plague that have bothered our nation changed that, but Quinter congregation, or the Topeka congregation, was ready to do that. And I often think of the combined group, if they were all put together, that they would be reminded of Winston Churchill at the close of World War II stood on the balcony with the Queen of England to recognize the thousands up and down the streets who were there to cheer on Winston Churchill's battle against the Nazis and the winning battle. And he went over and whispered something to the Queen, and they'd never seen her laugh very often, but she did that night. They asked her, said, will you tell us what Winston said? Yes, he said, Madam, he said, if this were my demise, it would be twice the size of this. So I would be quite aware that might be the case. But I extend special appreciation to those that have worked to put this together, to you in this Topeka congregation who have come out tonight, a very cold night to be here, and to others that have been involved with Barry. And we've been friends since we both discovered that we had a dog named Oscar. Now, we won't get into the details of that, but that's the truth. And we have been good friends, and he's been a helper and a coordinator. Kim Backenstow has been in touch with us and details of putting that video, which I have not seen together. You've not seen it before, have you? We've never seen it before. And so I don't know how she got it. But anyhow, she did. But there are others that have been involved, and I receive this honor on behalf of the many other pastors who would equal and many surpass the kind of faithful pastor that God's looking for. But I accept it in their honor tonight, representing them as well. I also thank God, as the moderators mentioned, the Helpmeet, 62 years, we celebrated our anniversary, and the encourager she always has been, not only in the work of the church, but in the pastoral decisions that are there. She's there to make them with me. Georgia. Well, tonight I'm going to use something different. When I was leader of young people's, once upon a time when I was a young person, I was maybe a junior in high school, and there were a lot of Sterling College students. We lived in Sterling, Kansas. And there were college students going there, and we were meeting in the youth group, and I was still to be the leader that week, and I sat there and asked Mother what to do, and she said, don't worry what to do. Well, I can't remember what others did. She said, that's the point. Don't worry about what anybody else has done. Do it your way. So tonight, we'll have a very different speech than you've ever heard before, Mr. President. And it's all centered around this man's experience at the surprise that every pastor, every Christian leader should expect when laboring on his cause, laboring in his time. The first came when I was still a licentiate. That is, had been licensed by the presbytery, and that's not the best you can do because they won't let you say the benediction, it won't let you go ahead and have marriages, that is, conduct marriages. But I was called to assist communion at the Indian Mission down in Oklahoma. We went down there and then the close of the Indian Mission. Boy, old Mr. Ward, in his 80s, and my father had gone along with me, just his renewed visit to the mission. And he said to me, you're a licentiate. You can preach, but you can't say the benediction. Is that correct? And I said, that's right. He said, very well then, your father will stand on this side, and I'll stand on this side, and you put your hand on their hand and my hand, and we'll say the benediction, and your hands will marvelously go up. And so that's the way I said the first benediction. And don't bring charges on me on that. Never forget that then it was just two people standing beside me, but now it represents the age groups of people that enabled me to be standing here tonight. For he was in his 80s, he was the older one. If I were to begin to list the age of those in the 80s, the power of the RJG Knights in my heart and life. They had the same professor there in that old building for my father when he was there in the 1920s, and have the same professors there when I came later on in the 1950s. Many, many older people. Dick Hutchison was a member of this congregation. What a blessing it was to know Richard and his wife Eleanor. Well, let's get started because they have said that there's a limit to this area, that they recommend 18 minutes, and anything longer than that, I would have to double my gift to the seminary for this year. So I'll do my best. My first gospel call was in Glenwood, Minnesota. As was the custom, it is the custom, a minister goes and moderates the call, and it came out for Bob McFarland. So he put it in his vest pocket, put it in his suit, and it was there in safety for 4 months. He didn't wear that coat again. And then he saw in there, there's an envelope in there, and that was a letter to Bob McFarland that he had a call. By that time, the Age People's Home knew it, and you probably heard it, the little boy that came downstairs, he said, did you talk to God tonight? He said, no, I talked to Mrs. God, and it's all over heaven by now. Well, that was it. The Age People's Home knew all about it, but I didn't know it for 4 months. And it might as well, didn't need to be announced after that time. But that was my first call. I thought of the verse, well done, thou hast been faithful, even in a few things. That sounds familiar. I don't know of anybody that's faithful in everything. But by the grace of God, I've known faithfulness in a few things. And I thank God for that particular event in this congregation of saying the same as I do at my wedding, till death do us part. This I believe, this I will die for. These are events. I won't do numbers. They say that's bad news because people say I missed number 3. Would you give me number 3 again? They're not numbered here. So starting off with the gospel call, it begins, you put some cookies on the lower shelf today in your sermon, Pastor, remarked a sweet older lady after the service. What should you say? Now, in all of these, I'm not going to give you the conclusion of what I said. That's why I said this is going to be a different address. For one thing, I'm reading much of this, and I do not read my sermons. So what should you say when a dear lady says that to you? Another, it was 2 o'clock a.m. when her front doorbell rang. I opened the door to see 2 high school boys, both in tears. We knew each other well. That night, Ron said, Bill, I'll be changing names. Bill's going to turn away from Christ. He told me tonight he was through with Christianity. What would you say? I invited them in. I'll not tell you tonight what I said. I'd like you to think about it. What would you say? You're a faithful man. You're a faithful lady. You're honoring God. How would you honor it in that kind of setting? A husband and wife from the community come to your office. They blurt out, "Our Fred and Gladys in your church?" That's not their real names. It's a real, isn't it? All of these are true. Because she just called my wife names that you wouldn't even print anywhere. And we're going to sue them for their whole farm. We're going to win it too. What would you say? What would you do? We've now switched parts of the country. The president of the local school board is on the phone, Mother Georgia said, "Bob," he said, "we're facing the firing of 2 coaches. They weren't even speaking to each other." He said, "You've been over there since they had to draft a teacher in history, and you've been teaching this semester for us." And assistant football coach, you know those men. "Could we come up to your study and discuss it with you?" I said, "Well, sure." I said, "When could you come?" Well, they only met a block away. They met in the grade school. They said, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. They sat down and they said, "We need your counsel. What is it?" What would you say? They wouldn't talk to each other. Both of them Christians in other churches. Another tour incident that involves the city limits of Topeka. Some of you already remember a man was arrested driving through the town at 80 miles an hour. He has explained he was heading for President Reagan and had a message to give. Boy, he had a trunk full of materials to get Reagan straightened up on how to be a president. Highway Patrol chased him down, and he assumed they were giving him a speeding way to get around all the sirens, so he sped it up, and the car had been taken for a test drive out there, a brand new Thunderbird out in Colorado Springs, and he was headed from Washington, D.C., but was caught. I don't go to every court at all. I haven't been to a court since then, really. I just went down to see what makes the man possesses this, because he said he had some spiritual answers for him, and I went down and they ruled him as cruelly, not criminally insane. Now, we had psychiatric care here, so he was put in the prison and treated criminally insane. Then the time came when they said he's been healed and he's ready to be headed down the road. I'm releasing him, so then out to the court to see what they would do now. Second time in my life I've been, and these words came out to the judges. "You've now been healed. You've shown every side. You know it's medicine you weren't taking to get into these streaks of insanity. I'm releasing you to the custody of Robert McFarland." Where? And he turned around and did this to me. Hi. It's true, I visited the people in the various wards here in town. I visited the home there, the criminally insane place. He said, the custody means he'll go with you. Robert McFarland, I'm sure he's here today, is he? Yes. What would you say to this man as you walk down the hall of the court? This man was assigned to be with you from now on. The next one, after counseling the wife whose family was a member of another church about the problems of her marriage, I explained that I wanted to talk to her husband to see what it was all about. After the husband heard some of the problems and my suggestions, he got madder and stood up, walked to the door and said, "Who in the hell do you think you are?" and walked out the door. What would you have done? You're going to be a faithful man of God. what would you have done? A telephone call came to me on the way home from Senate. The husband was involved in a tragic car accident. They were stopped at a train crossing when the car was hit from behind by a great big truck and knocked into the path of the train. His wife and baby girl was in the back seat. Both were dead. That wasn't the only death. Killed 3 more, till a total of 3. But the call was the husband. Said, I want you to attend the funeral of my wife and little baby. What would you say? You were just stopped in Illinois. He caught you there and found you there, I should say. What do you say in cases like that? Think about it. You want to be a faithful servant. Just the others few here. A bright, energetic 3-year-old is tired of sitting in church. So she races down the aisle, heads for the pulpit. Her mother is on the trail, close pursuit, only 3 pews behind. The little girl runs up on the pulpit, races in back of me to the other side, down the other side, and the mother runs across the front after her, and she sees the mother coming, so she goes back, and the mother goes back. So the congregation is watching this affair from off the front. And what do you do as minister? What are you going to do? Sit there and watch this the rest of the day? What do you do to be faithful so you don't make the family just hate you, what you do? It was very early one summer day when the telephone rang. One of my members, a sweet elderly lady, was on the phone. She asks for me if I've seen the glorious sunrise. In the summer, it comes up to about 5:15, they say. What would you have said if a lady woke you up to ask you to see the sunrise? Following the church discipline matter, the wife of the husband that had been disciplined warned me that her husband was so mad at the elders that he would kill Bob if he found him alone. What do you say then? What would you have done? The last one I'll mention is this. We were in Northern Ireland at the time of 9/11. The Twin Towers had both come down. The world is out to kill Americans. The embassy, the American embassy, I didn't know they knew where I was when George was with me. They knew where my family was, but they wrote and said, whatever you do, keep a low profile. We want no Americans who appear in public for this coming time. My name was already printed, announced that I would be preaching in this church 3 days later. What do you do? What would you do? Wouldn't it be a faithful minister of God? Those are all not made-up stories. Those are real stories, right off of the experience of mine. This is one of the sadder ones. One of the members of the church was very sick. I stopped by to visit him, and then went to preach and he had his evening service. Came back home that way, and there was an elder that I left him there beside him to counsel, comfort, and he died by then. So this elder helped me love the body, which is some of the responsibilities that may come to a minister several times as me. And we loaded him in the church. We loaded it in the ambulance waiting. But the next week at church, this man had a brother that was on the session. He farmed 1 mile away from him. He scolded me. He said, I missed out on the funeral. Why didn't you tell me he died? I said, your brother was there. Help me load him on. What would you have said? I did inquire further enough to find out that those two brothers had not spoken for one another for 20 years. During a very solemn communion service, where they don't have solemn services in Ireland, the father was sitting with his family, and he passed out. He's overdosed on pain medicine. His 14-year-old daughter began to scream out in the middle of this, since he had fallen over on her. He's dead, he's dead. We seldom have people yelling out in the Reformed Presbyterian services. Nurses that were there immediately gathered around. He had just passed out, and they brought him back to consciousness and helped him out of the church. Now then, we're right in the middle of communion, just ready to pass out the elements. Some of you pastors here, what do you do next to bring that congregation back to a meditation on what Christ did? What do you say next? The last one, it was a 10-year-old son of a couple, a deaf couple in the congregation. It's 6 a.m. It's a winter morning. And the phone rings. He said he's calling me because his dad asked him to call me. He said, you go call the pastor because he'll know how to fix my car and get it started. I can't get my car started. How do you respond to this boy whose parents are deaf and cannot speak? What do you do at 6 a.m. in the morning? I've been there working on his car. He mentioned I have an old Model A. They found that I can repair the vehicles that need to be repaired. What do you say? Well, we could go on. It's an honor to be here, and maybe some of you are realizing that serving the Lord is not only what happens when you stand up and open the Word of God here in the pulpit like this. Many of the ministries come out there where we show our faithfulness to other people and their lives. Might this challenge be accepted by you? It's been a tremendous honor for me. My thanks to the seminary for this honor.
Thank you, Bob. Let's pray together. God, our Father in heaven, as we bow before you, we are so thankful for that faithful servant that you sent to this world, the Son of Man who said he did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And we know that's why we're all here tonight, because of that faithfulness of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. And we thank you, O Lord, for how you do set apart your servants and give them particular responsibilities in your kingdom. And we do just thank you so greatly, Father, for all that you've done in and through the life of Bob and Georgia, for all the years of service that they have rendered